Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping the African continent. Benin foiled a coup attempt that triggered regional military support and emergency action from ECOWAS and the AU. At the same time, tensions escalated between Nigeria and the Alliance for Sahel States over an unapproved Nigerian military landing in Burkina Faso. What impact could these twin crises have on West Africa's security cooperation? The U.S. congressional delegation met with the NSA Director Nuhu Ribadu in Abuja amid U.S. concerns over alleged religious persecution, which Nigeria rejects. How might this visit shape security outcomes for Nigeria? A new U.S. brokered peace and mineral cooperation deal between Congo and Rwanda was quickly tested as fresh fighting erupted between Congo's army and M23 rebels, raising doubts about the agreement's duration. Congo accuses Rwanda of violations, while the U.S. calls for restraint amidst fear that mineral interests are overshadowing real peace efforts. Can this deal survive renewed conflict, or is deeper diplomacy needed to address long-standing tensions? Joining us today for further insights is Confidence McHenry, security analyst at SBM Intelligence. Welcome, Confidence, the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be back here after how many days of not featuring.
I mean,
Mm,
it's always great to have you, but
mm.
it's tricky because we always have to talk about security issues, and it's bad security issues.
I do not have a problem with with being the having of bad news of trying to explain it with bad news. So it's a sort of not for locally and domestic internationally. So good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with our first story where we had another coup failed a coup attempt. So we've been seeing this all over Africa, should I say. It's been springing
Not
up
necessarily Africa, just across
in
the
West Africa,
Sahel belts.
Sahel.
Yeah.
Okay. Across the Sahel, we've seen quite a number of coup attempts, successful ones, not so successful ones. What is happening there? Why are we seeing this?
hmm it depends. It's a mix of factors. Some of the reasons why the coups that have happened are down to reasons why you could say having to do with local factor. The issues that led to the coup in Madagascar in October of this year, it's quite different from the reasons that led to the coup in Niger or the one that happened in Mali in 2020 and 2021, or even Benin, as we're talking about, that happened over the weekend. So there are various causative factors for this. But if you're going to look for a one similar cause to link all of them together, you could you will not be wrong to land on dissatisfaction with governance process across all of the countries because naturally, if things were good, if the political and the ruling elites were doing really well, there would have been a lot of pushback from many people, the citizens who would have said, no, this is not allowed. We've gone way past that era and everything. But the reaction from the citizenry whenever these things happen, especially from Guinea-Bissau, as we saw last week, it was just one of shrug, just yet another Tuesday. So what it implies is simply that many people, of course, when I say many people, I'm talking about young people. The continent has a population with a median age of about 18.1. They've lived through many of their years in life without experiencing what we colloquially call dividends of democracy. So whenever the military comes to end that democratic experiment, so it's almost like a welcome relief, even though many of them have not really lived through military rule, given that a lot of these military incursions into democracy sort of ended at the end of the last century, and the new century was supposed to usher in an era of peace and prosperity, but hasn't largely delivered on that promise. So they're not too squeamish with the idea of trying to another thing. in replacement of some of the misgivings they are facing. So, in summary of everything I've just said, every coup is typical and is local to its own country. But if there is one thing you ask young people across the continent who are experiencing these things, they will tell you that the democratic civilian elites have not delivered on the goods.
I mean, I agree with you. You said the dissatisfaction with the governance process, and that's actually what's causing even the kind of eruptions or dissent of the
Yep.
Nigerian populace. But I mean, we saw Nigeria jump in to this fight and try to, reinforce its stance as the giant of Africa.
Yes.
Immediately,
Okay.
I mean, we tried.
Let me not be that guy.
We saw the government
Yes.
step in to try to address this, kind of like the protector of democracy here. So I mean,
Yeah.
it went, and then in that it now escalated tensions with the Sahel states because I mean it made an unapproved military landing in Burkina Faso. So what impact do you think would that stand? I mean, Nigeria is trying to say we need our democracy to stay. I mean, protector of our democracy. But on the one hand, it was also infringing on the sovereignty of another country.
Yeah, so I wouldn't call it that. The difference between what happened in Niger and what happened in Benin is that, unlike in Niger, where it was a regional initiative to push out the purchased and then restore democracy, in Benin, it was the president of the country that requested for the help. I've been looking at details surrounding the coup itself. It was well planned, but execution was largely poor. Execution was largely poor. And the reason it was poor was because the coup plotters failed to get a hold of the president. So for 3 hours, they were marauding everything they could maraud, they were destroying and then seizing everything they could seize. But they left out the important fact, which is seizing the president, which is what experienced coup plotters would do. And I would also give a parallel to this. In Turkey in 2016, the reason the coup failed was because they could not get a hold of Erdogan. And he had to quash the coup by coming on FaceTime. So the communication lines were not cut. You understand? It was very easy for, even though they arrested, certain important parts of the military hierarchy in the country, the mere fact that they left the president, was just sort of the Achilles in their heel, and he was able to get help from Abuja. Now, the reason why Abuja left ECOWAS and now in the alliance of Sahel states, and these three states are client states of Russia. Apart from that, all of these three states had military incursions to their politics because, number one, they keep saying that the democratic, government have not really solved the security nightmare, so they are stepping in. But data has shown that the security situation has gotten worse with more deaths, more attacks, much more people displaced than before when the Western military backers, I'm talking about France and the European Union, were there. So many of them have not really solved the problem. So if you're adding Benin to the mix, you're now having another hostile government right on Nigeria's doorstep, and not just on Nigeria's doorstep, in the most economically viable part of Nigeria's border, its western border. So it's a problem that the Nigerian government could not afford because the military has done, and these countries in the region, they've done a terrible job in handling the security issues. And while Benin's own security crisis, as as imposed by JNIM and other Islamist group from the Islamic states in the Sahel, as well as Al-Qaeda, while it has been largely localized in the north, in just two departments of the country, there is a chance that a poor handling by the military is going to make it spread down to the southern parts of the country and it's going to affect Lagos. So there's a national security imperative. There's also the geopolitical imperative. Like I said previously, there are seven Burkinabes, they were fingered in the coup. The leader of the coup is, as I speak, as we make this recording, is currently in Lomé in Togo. Togo has been flirting with the AES. Now, before the coup happened, Chani came out to accuse Benin of being a lackey for France. So if that coup has actually succeeded in Benin, Nigeria would have lost a very important ally, not just a small ally, but one very, very close to its border. So it's now just be that Abuja will now be encircled by Russian client states, which would be at variance with what Tinubu being very pro-Western. I would say the most pro-Western leader we've had since Balewa in the 1960s is something that he cannot stomach. So there's also that. So I don't think that people who are criticizing Nigeria's government involvement, intervention, know all the facts, and even if they do know all the facts, they are actually being strategic or they are being forthright in their thinking enough to actually accept what's going on.
I mean, it's good that you broke down the facts to, make it like
Yeah.
understandable even for our listeners to know that,
Yeah.
okay, even if we were saying, I mean, why was Nigeria jumping in?
Yeah.
Because I mean, our house is on fire. So why are
Benin is
you
also our house because if you ask the average Nigerian, the one that lives in the southwest, they will say that Benin is Nigeria's 37th state. So whatever
interesting?
happens in Benin is going to affect us. I mean, if you look at Nigeria's western border, you will look at communities in Niger, in Kwara, and in Kogi states. All of the security issues that are happening in those areas actually affect northern Benin. The
Mm.
security and the trade and economic corridor in that place are so interwoven that it's very, very hard to tell which one is Nigeria and which one is in Benin. So whatever happens in Benin affects Nigeria. So we cannot look, even if we say we are so dead as a giant of Africa and then we can overlook what's happening in Guinea-Bissau, we can overlook what's happening in Burkina Faso. I don't think we can overlook steadily what's happening in Benin. Benin is small, you understand? And then there's also the Cameroonian element that, okay, Cameroon is big enough to handle its own issues, even if it sort of affects us. So I don't think that it does us any service to look at Benin fall into the hands of, whatever it's falling into, and then we'll say we are not going to stop it because non-intervention. Come on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now let's come back to our house,
Yeah.
right? So the US congressional delegation met with Nuhu Ribadu in Abuja amid the US concerns over allegation of religious persecution. I mean, so we've been seeing it, I mean, since Trump made the declaration of particular interest for Nigeria,
Country of particular concern.
yeah, country of particular concern. Thank you for that. We've seen kind of a lot of security measures being taken place, so kind of like adjustments, if you may say.
Or eye service if you're very principled.
Eye service, if you yeah. But we've seen a response. What do you think this delegation, what difference do you think this delegation will make? Do you think it's going to make any difference or it's just the usual eye service?
Yeah, I think the government will try to spin this delegation visit as them being proactive. Their initial reaction to the whole country of particular concern designation thing was one of pushback, however poor and however ineffective it was. But I think they've been getting good advice and they've been trying to spin the whole thing by telling the Americans, oh, we are not so impervious to your help. If you want to help us, by all means, you're open for your help. They've demonstrated this in several ways by allowing ISR, that's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance flights from Ghana to surveil parts of northern Nigeria. And then they've been to the US, but Ribadu, the National Security Advisor, led by a security team that includes the defense minister, the new one. I think a couple of others, including the junior minister of defense, Bianca Ojukwu, they went to the US a couple of weeks ago. And then they've also invited the American delegation to come and see what is on the ground. So what I'm trying to say is, on one hand, it could be a PR battle, winning the Nigerian government trying to win a PR battle by saying that, yes, we have these problems on the ground, but if you can help us with this and this, you understand, this IDP camps you're saying that is something we can be able to close. I mean, the Borno State government will tell you that it's something we've done before because I think between 2021 and 2022, the Borno State government actively tried to close the IDP camps that the US Secretary General even had to come and visit himself and led to a warning and everything. So on that particular front, they are spinning it as they being open to help, away from all of the accusations that they are actively sponsoring it. But where I think it will largely backfire is that the people on the ground from the US are seeing exactly what's going on firsthand, and then they are seeing the failure of the Nigerian government to do its job. We usually say that the failure of the number one reason of government's existence is to protect lives and properties under its domain. The Nigerian government has failed very spectacularly at it. But I think what they see now will be able to give, should I say, impetus to many people who have been pushing this narrative, especially in the US and in Nigerian social media, to see that beyond what many of their Nigerian government traducers will be telling them in the media, in the US and everything, that things are really, really happening on the ground. At the end of the day, what is likely to come out of it is if they're unable to marry the two, expectations. The Nigerian government side trying to win this as a PR battle has been open for help. And then the people who are documenting these things for the Americans see that the Nigerian government is simply not doing enough. I think it's going to lead to a bust up in the future. Because it is one thing for you to visit, it is one thing for you to see, and then it is one thing for you to still hear that the thing you saw the last time you come is it happening. So it's likely going to lead to a bust up. But yeah, I would hope that with all of the help that the Nigerian government is getting from the Americans, that they should be able to do a little bit of a job. But the job that they are going to do will not be largely dependent on the kind of pressure the Americans put on them. Because we are not the people that know how to do things for long. We are very what's the word now? We are very short-termist. Short-termist in our thinking. We just want to do things sharp, sharp, and then get on with it without actually having to sit down to do it in a thorough, final detail. So I think that's one way the Americans will have to step in to insist that the right thing is being done and it's actually being followed through.
But I mean, we've also seen the Nigerian government being proactive. I mean, call it eye service, but we've seen the replacement of the Minister of Defense. We've seen the president also try to recall, not really try, but recall police officers from VIP appointments, kind of. And then we've also seen the increase of military. So kind of like recall.
So those are low-hanging fruits.
What do they need to do? What do we need to do to get out of this mess and to even get Nigeria off that list?
When these things happened, what was the twin accusations against the Nigerian government? Number one is that it is looking the other way while terrorists, headsmen, whoever they are, they're killing Nigerians in bulk, killing Nigerians in mass. So the Nigerian government was an onlooker at best and an accomplice at worst. You understand? Now, on the one hand, what the government has been able to do is to show that they have not really been an onlooker, which is largely debatable. But the other parts where they have actually been accused of being willing participants have not been addressed. Again, I would make mention of what happened in Yelawata in June of this year, that they were deceived. I don't know how it's going to take them, how many hours it's going to take them to a different location to something that is happening nearby and happen for 4 hours. There's no accountability for that. The school abduction in Niger State, in Kebbi State rather, the same thing happened. There was intelligence from the DSS, passed to the security forces. They went there. 30 minutes before the abduction happened, they withdrew. Several. I could go on, and just for this year alone, there's been no accountability on that part. So if you tell me that you're not complicit in this thing, so why are you not making efforts to make sure that people who are doing these things, they actually being held to account, and then you're purging those corrupt elements from your
security forces? The Senate, right? We're seeing the Senate, the National Assembly being proactive this time.
How?
They are calling for capital punishments for terrorists, for kidnappers. Do you think that will make it?
We always see we are not short of laws. Implementation is the problem. 2022, when they read our kidnap report, our economics of kidnapping industry report, they said they were going to outlaw kidnapping. Yeah, and they are going to outlaw kidnap ransom payments. What has become of it? We have good laws. We have laws that cater to cultism, cult clashes or youth gang clashes, the much more better word for it. But we still have cult clashes. The question is implementation. You're recalling police officers from serving VIPs. That's not a problem. The problem is, do you have a database of how many police officers are attached to VIPs? Fruits that are so low-hanging, call them air service. Because the deeper structural reforms are not actually being done. Accountability is not being done. Heads are not ruling. Things you have police officers, you have military officers stationed at a particular community, and then people will still come, kill everybody, and move, and leave the military officers there without touching them. And then there's no accountability. So unless accountability goes into the system, every other thing, whether you're outlawing kidnap, ransom payments, you're outlawing terrorism, I'm sorry, you're just wasting time. Just go home, man.
Sadly. But I mean, this is the right step they're taking the right step, even if they are being forced, kind of.
No, they have to be forced.
They are being forced.
If they have to.
But they are being proactive.
Okay, if you say so.
Let's see.
I did not share that view.
Let's see what comes out of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so to our final story, where we see the US brokered peace and mineral cooperation deal between Congo and Rwanda has quickly erupted, or should I say gone up in flames, basically, because
Unexpectedly.
we're still saying the attack conflict is still going on. Do you think that this deal will survive? I mean, it's really shaking now, but what do you think needs to be done to have like a deeper, long-standing address to these tensions?
Oh. So I don't know what the Americans were thinking they were going to achieve when they brokered that deal, but I do know that the interest that underlied the attempts to broker that deal is mostly down to things like mineral resources, extraction of mineral resources in the geopolitical competition with China over critical minerals. So the Americans were not really that keen on solving a problem that goes back to the 1960s when we had the first Congo War. Oh sorry, when we had the first indications that there were going to be Rwandan genocide, and then it continued from the 1970s to 1994. And then we had the first Congo War in 1996. These are historical problems that have been going on for quite a while. You understand? So the Americans were not really that keen on actually solving the problem. You understand? As deep as it's supposed to be. What they always wanted to do was just to get the minerals out.
Get minerals
Just get the
out.
minerals out. And there's a way Trump does his deals.
Let's
Like,
cheat.
yeah, you stop fighting. You know how, growing up, you're fighting with your siblings, and then your mom comes in and say she doesn't care what
What
caused the
started
fight.
it? You
She just wants you guys to just stop
stop
fighting. You
fighting.
understand? So you guys stop fighting for that moment, but the animosity continues.
The beef is still
That's
there.
exactly is what is wrong with Trump's deals. Look at all of the deals he has brokered this year in his speech for the Nobel Peace Prize. India and Pakistan is still there, even though the Indians say he didn't do anything. Thailand and Cambodia, as of this week, they started fighting again. Israel, Gaza, Israel is still running all over the place. Rwanda, Congo, the same thing. You understand? So at the very least, there is not a genuine effort. So look at let me read you something that happened. I mean, while we are having a breakout. So there was something wrong with the stuff. That's the agreement. So Article 4 sort of mandates a joint security mechanism within 30 days to monitor borders. But without third-party verification from Angola or the African Union, Rwanda delayed activation by citing unfulfilled FDLR, that's Congolese militias that are attacking Rwanda positions, according to the Rwandan government. Or unfulfilled FDLR neutralization, which is a precondition that Tshisekedi only met on paper through taking raids in Walikale that spared, core Hutu militia camps. So this is one of the reasons why the Rwandans have, just picked on it and said, okay, we're going to go on the offensive and everything. And it's so crazy that several of these loopholes have not been addressed. You understand? The Doha peace talks and everything, the American-led efforts and everything, they have not really tried to achieve all of these things. All they've just done is let's stop fighting the economic benefits to get and try to keep the Chinese away from getting those things. Unfortunately, it's not going to work. It might buy you time, it might buy you resources for a few months, but for a conflict as integral and as very, 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 very tricky, and I'm trying to look for the right words, as important as to the Great Lakes region, I don't think just simply telling two people to stop fighting because you have economic benefits for them is just simply going to do the needle.
I agree with you because if you don't address the root cause, then we just keep going round and round.
Yeah.
So we keep putting tape, but then I mean it
Tapering
doesn't.
over the cracks.
Yeah, doesn't last as well.
Mm.
So what is going to be the end with this?
I think we would largely have to wait for what comes out of the Doha peace talks, which is the parallel talks to what the Americans are offering. Um, But I do not think that it's actually going to solve the problem, like stop the fighting the way the Americans would have, because in this kind of a thing, you need somebody with the pedigree, with the power, or the prestige as the United States would have to compel people to stop fighting. But if the Americans are unable to do it, I don't think the Qataris will be able to do it like that. So my projection for the conflict is that in 2026, it's likely going to get worse. As we recall, the M23 is rapidly moving in Eastern DRC. They've taken over these two pivots. They're going into other communities, and also it's likely going to end up in a worse shape. And they're strengthening the M23 positions and the Rwandan position ahead of the Congolese election that is going to largely disenfranchise many parts of Congolese people in the Eastern Congo from voting in the elections next year. So in every way you look at it, I don't think it's actually a good outcome for the Congolese.
I mean, like, we can't keep talking about like things happening in Congo, and it feels like the AU is not Africa. We're not solving our own problems as well. We're not being our brother's keeper.
Mhm.
Why do you think that? I mean, the efforts from the AU is not even being productive.
Because there are too many competing interests in the conflict. The South African Development Commission got in on the act, trying to support the Congolese. Unfortunately, South African forces got trapped, sometime along the fighting before the Americans intervened. They got trapped, and then the Rwandans promised them a safe passage. That was one of the first indications that actually, beyond all of the denials by Paul Kagame, there is actually Rwandan troops on the ground. Even something that the UN have documented very much. They have up to about 4,000 people as of June, July on the ground. They had to promise them safe passage. So there are lots of competing interests. The Ugandans, for instance, try to play both sides, given how close they are to the situation. So sometimes they go into Eastern Congo and the guys are fighting the Allied Defense Forces, an Islamic State affiliated group. But it doesn't end there. They are also involved actively in exporting illegal mined resources across the border. So you also have the Burundian component to it. Burundi also supports the Congolese forces, against the Rwandans, and then they've been at their wits' end with this renewed offensive by the M23, which is very close to the Burundian border. So there's so many competing interests, so much so that you can hardly get the African Union to be unified in this position because this is something that they've left to the regions. That's the sub-regional groupings, the East African Community, as well as the South African Development Commission. So the countries that are most closest to it, if they've not been able to handle it, I don't think there's so much that the African Union will be able to do.
I mean, that's crazy and sad at the same time.
Yep.
Crazy,
It's crazy and sad.
crazy and sad.
Mhm.
Thank you very much, Confidence, for joining us on today's episode. It's
Yep,
always
that's
a
me.
pleasure having you on the podcast.
Mhm.
And to our listeners, this podcast is brought to you by SBM Intelligence. You can catch all our episodes by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insights into our work, you can visit sbmintel.com. You can also stay connected with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Catch us next week for our final episode of the year, where we'll be unpacking the biggest stories shaping the African continent. Until then, thank you for listening.